right, I got that link.
All right, we should be live on YouTube as well as the cloud recording. I'm checking a second system just for verification.
We are live on YouTube. Link is live in Sakai, and link is live in Canvas. Both are working. So we are all set there. Hi, Mark. Chris is back. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Tim, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
Good, sir. Very good.
You look good today, too. You got dressed up for us.
Hey, I tell you what. So, dress up occasionally here.
I was dressed up earlier and then decided to support this from home. All right.
You got dressed up for it.
Hey, Steve, how are you doing?
You're muted, Steve.
There we go. How are you?
Good,
Can
sir.
you hear me now? Okay.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Lex.
Lex.
Is my voice working? Yes.
I'm leaving. This is the one. Let's see, it's James and Tim. Jesus. Hey, Tim. Did you get the live stream set up?
Hey, Matt.
Yes, it's
Thank you.
everything's live and recording right now, including the previous exclamation.
All right. Thanks, James. Thanks,
Mhm.
Tim.
Yep. And you should be all set. If you do need to do polls, you'll have to let us know. We could show you how to do it really quickly if you want to take a quick
I
test.
think I've done them before. Let me
Perfect.
check and make sure I know how to do it.
Yep.
You just type in the question.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Working for you?
Yep, seems to.
Awesome. All right, James and I are gonna go quiet.
All righty, thank you. Thanks for
Yep.
helping.
Yep.
And we have a bunch of people that are here early. There must be nothing better to do this afternoon. I'm gonna mute this for a bit till the official start time in case the dogs start barking.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. We'll start here momentarily. What are we doing? Well, We just barely have a quorum if everybody here is a senator, which is not the case, so.
We have still 3 minutes to
I
go.
know. Thank you.
Yeah.
My wife was just wondering why we hadn't started, and I told her, well, tradition is 3:10. We have about 1 more minute till start time. Let's see here. And it looks like it is time to start, so I will call the meeting to order at 3:10. I just have a couple announcements here. Want to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded. And so if you have objections, by being here, you are agreeing to being recorded. So, but it is being recorded. Remind folks again, there are still vacancies on Faculty Grievance Committee. This is an important committee. It'd be nice to fill it. Please send any names to Senate Exec. There's also a proposal relating to membership later on in the agenda that we hope to get to. The faculty handbook is, as far as I know, up to date. So if you are referencing it, it should be up to date. You might need to refresh your browser. When I was told it was up to date, I was still getting the old version. So you may need to refresh browsers to get the right version to show up. I wanted to give thanks again to our tech folks for helping to set this up, James and Tim Wheat. And I also wanted to finish with one last thank you for the ad hoc Senate committee. I had communicated with Jeannie Bukowski a couple weeks ago and asked if they had any last recommendations before the committee was dissolved. They had fulfilled their charge. Their last couple of recommendations are in one of the addendas sent out on Monday, and encourage you to read it. Basically, the thrust of those recommendations is that things that need to be done should be channeled through standing Senate committees. And I would support that recommendation, by the way. So anyway, I want to again publicly thank the members of that committee for their service. I think they've done a valuable service, and I think people are listening. With that, I'm not going to try to project a, I have one other announcement. On I have a personal issue that I have to deal with at 4 o'clock today. And so I'm going to have to bow out about 5 minutes before that. But our Vice President of the Senate, Teresa Drake, will be assuming the responsibilities of chairing the meeting at that point. So thanks to Teresa for being willing to step in to do so. I would entertain, again, I'm not going to, in general, try to post pictures of things that we're talking about, except when we get to the motions, and then I will do a share screen for them. Otherwise, I would encourage you to follow along in the agendas I sent out. I would entertain a motion to approve some minutes. So let's do these one by one. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the meetings of the special meeting of the 2020-2021 University Senate on July 16th. There were significant revisions and additions to those minutes submitted by one of our colleagues. And both the original versions circulated with the agenda for the first regular meeting are attached to the agenda, but I've also included those significant revisions. And again, I will entertain a motion to approve the special meeting minutes. Do I hear such a motion?
I'll so move. Danielle Glassmeyer.
Danielle Glassmeyer, thank you. Second?
Second, Jeannie Bukowski.
Jeannie Bukowski seconded those. Any additions, corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say
Aye.
nay. And the motion carries. Those minutes are approved. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the first regular meeting.
So I move, Fred.
Fred Terriari, thank you very much, Fred. A second?
So moved, Twyla Lukoviak.
Thank you, Twyla. Any discussion, any additions, corrections, revisions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the first regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion carries. And I believe, let me check the agenda here, but I believe we are ready for reports from administrators.
Okay.
Yes, we are. So President Standiford, I will turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you, Matt. I unmuted just as you headed to that part of the agenda, so I saw it coming. But thank you, Matt. And I want to start by really saying thank you to everybody. I recognize all the hard work that continues to happen to get us through this very unique academic year. And it's interesting because we're roughly halfway through the on-campus component. I'm always clear on what part we're through of this semester. And while things have seemed to quiet down, I recognize that there's still a lot of hard work, really hard work going on a number of fronts. And I just wanted to again say thank you for all the extra effort. It's always obviously a heavy lift to get the year off to a start, but it's been particularly challenging this year. And I just want to say, again, thank you for all the work that I know is going on right now. In terms of my report, I want to talk briefly about two key announcements that were made earlier this week. We announced that Tom Hammerton will be joining us as our new VP of Advancement. Really excited that Tom can be joining us. This is, I think some of you know, it's a bit of a homecoming for Tom. He was with us a number of years ago and is going to come back and I think really help us out on the advancement front. And then also Molly Klusky is taking on the new role of Director of Online and Distance Learning. And I had previously announced that Chris Jones is taking on the role of VP of Strategy and Innovation. And I want to acknowledge and talk a little bit about the fact that two of these positions are actually new. But I also want to be clear that these will not have a negative impact on the budget in ways that you might assume. So I want to talk through that just a little bit. First of all, one of the things I wanted to clarify is that Molly's new position is actually funded through restricted charitable gifts. We're creating this position now, really has no negative impact on the budget in the short term. And in fact, because we're actually creating the position, it's giving us access to some funds that would otherwise not be usable. So this funding support is partly what has allowed us to move quickly with the new role that Molly will be taking on for us. And I'm thrilled that we're able to do that because, again, it gives us access to funds that otherwise would be sitting idle. In terms of Chris's new position, even with the addition of Chris and Molly, if you take both of those into consideration, we still have a net reduction in the number of senior administrative positions. We haven't talked about this a lot, but just to be clear, we've not replaced an open position for an associate VP of marketing. We are combining the business and engineering dean position, and we're restructuring the graduate school. So the net effect is actually a reduction in overall administrative cost. And I know that we haven't talked about this much, so that probably wasn't obvious. And if that's a concern, I wanted to let people know that where some of those funds are coming from and the overall impact on the budget. Another potential concern that may be true for all these cases is that we have moved in a way in terms of much faster hiring than anything I am accustomed to doing, just to be clear. Under normal circumstances, I'm a pretty strong advocate of doing national searches that are much more inclusive, get more people involved than we've done in these searches specifically. Unfortunately, these are not normal times, and each of these positions really plays a key role in helping us get out of our vicious cycle of austerity. So I felt it was important that with these searches that we move as fast as possible, and that's what we've done. One of the things I want to be really thoughtful about is we cannot and will not continue to operate in an environment of continuous cuts. I realize how fundamentally damaging this is to the organizational culture. I hear and appreciate the frustrations with the tough decisions we've had to make this year to get the budget under control. And to be clear, there's been no joy in doing any of this. Unfortunately, these are decisions we had to make to move towards financial sustainability. But I'm strongly of the mind that this approach to constant cutting of the budget is not sustainable. So in addition to the things that we've done, I think it's really important that we make critical investments that get us out of the vicious cycle of austerity. Getting these positions that we filled recently filled quickly, and I would add the CFO position, which is one we filled quickly earlier this year, have been key to getting our cost under control, but more importantly, really getting to the point where we can generate new resources that in turn will significantly decrease the need to do additional cuts moving forward. So this is about getting us out of that vicious cycle of austerity and moving us towards a growth mentality that is critical to our long-term sustainability. One of the things that has, I think, worked out surprisingly well is we're incredibly fortunate that Jeff, Chris, Tom, and Molly have stepped up to take on these key roles for us. And I am particularly excited that we've been able to attract two outstanding internal candidates with Chris and Molly into these critical roles. In doing so, one of the things that I'm excited about is we've put some of our best people in positions to really help us tackle some of our biggest problems. And that to me is a real opportunity. And it's also how we get past this mode of constant survival through a series of cuts and into a growth mentality of thriving. And that's really going to be the focus of what Chris and Molly are going to help us do. Now, having said all that, I want to be much more focused on doing more inclusive searches with a greater emphasis on creating a large and diverse candidate pool moving forward. And we have a great opportunity to do so with the searches we're about to launch for our open dean positions. For these positions, we actually plan to do national searches with a focus on creating a large and diverse candidate pool. And to aid us in this process, we'll actually be working with a really world-class search firm called Witt Kiefer. They have a great history of creating large and diverse candidate pools. And so I'm excited to be able to bring them in to this process. So we'll share more about what we're planning to do with the dean searches in the near future. The reason I wanted to bring this up now is I wanted to recognize the accelerated process by which we've been doing a number of the hirings in recent months, and to clarify that our plan is to slow things down a bit moving forward. And just wanted to kind of clarify where we're at with some of the positions that we've been creating as of late. So that's really what I wanted to share as my report. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions about these comments or other topics that might be of interest to you.
President Standerford.
Yeah, please.
You won't be surprised. It's Danielle. I have a question for you that has been raised by my constituents about the teaching load policy
Right.
that has been announced on September 30th. I do have a
Okay.
little bit of a statement before I let you just freewheel here.
Okay.
It seems that the policy is framed in good intentions. I think we all recognize that, to incentivize classroom teaching and to recognize the difficulties that can ensue from different modes of teaching that we've been unused to in the past, right? That are making stresses on us. But my colleagues have suggested, and I tend to concur, that this policy appears to be framed without sufficient attention to, or perhaps knowledge of, how classrooms, real or virtual, are in fact running this semester. It appears that a single measure is being considered here to give the reward of a return to a 3-course load. And that single measure appears to be the teacher's ability to be in the same room with students. In addition, the policy seems inequitable, given that in some departments, faculty without reductions for service carried a 3-course load already this semester, that there's a huge negative impact potential to our students who luck into a teacher who's exhausted by a second semester of 4 courses, that many online teachers are running synchronous classes, and that the pedagogy for different disciplines varies widely. In short, one colleague suggested that Bradley may be mistaking its brand here when it posits that face-to-face instruction, rather than high-quality instruction, is the measuring rod for this decision. Finally, many have voiced concerns that they feel they are being manipulated into making a choice between a manageable course load and their health, or the health of loved ones they care for. Can you provide me with comment to take back to my colleagues that provide some detail about this policy, the fact gathering and evidentiary basis for the decision, and what you're doing to make sure that this is in fact an equitable policy, as well as one that is not grounds for an ADA-based or age discrimination lawsuit?
So I appreciate you bringing this up. This has come up in a different forum as well. So we've talked a little bit about this with different groups, but I'm happy to share some more. First of all, one of the things that you mentioned is that it's not based on a knowledge of how things are going this semester. And I would actually push back on that statement and say that, in fact, the policy came out of precisely getting more detailed information about how things are going this semester. And one of the things that we've gotten clear and unequivocal feedback on is that the workload, we call it face-to-face, but there is no face-to-face class in today's environment. It's a hybrid class by design, right? We cannot design any classes without the expectation that X% of the students at any one time may need to be virtual. And everybody's felt that pain this semester when we entered the quarantine, if not sooner. So one of the ways we've talked about this, and I actually, I wish I could rewrite the script and go back to the announcement and perhaps clarify some of this a little bit better. Because really this was an attempt to recognize, was not an attempt to overly burden individuals that were either doing fully online or fully face-to-face, which of course nobody's doing right now, but was to recognize the extreme amount of extra work that is associated with a hybrid format. So the feedback I'm getting from your colleagues is that a 3-3 hybrid load is actually quite a bit more work than a 4-4 face-to-face or a 4-4 fully online. And so what this has really been an attempt to do is to do what I would describe as a work equalization, to recognize, and again, based on the very detailed feedback we've got from people throughout the semester, to recognize that this is an exceptionally higher amount of work to go into this hybrid format and to try to do some attempt to equalize the work out on that a little bit more. So that really was the essence of the policy. I know it didn't necessarily read and write that way when we sent it out, and I wish I could go back and rewrite some of that. It was in there, it was in the announcement. It wasn't the emphasis of the announcement, but it really was at the essence of what we're trying to do, is to recognize it. It's just, it's a lot of work. I mean, I suspect many of you on the call have done the hybrid format. I've seen several pictures of people with their desks, and they've got this group online that they're talking, these folks that are in quarantine that they're talking to, this group's trying to talk in class, and trying to synchronize that all at the same time is just an unusually large amount of work. And that's at the heart of what the policy is trying to get to.
There's no doubt that, I think in anyone's mind that it was a good faith effort to try to equalize. But these unintended consequences are of great concern. One thing I would ask, though, is if I may be so bold, how did you gather evidence? You said you've heard from people, but I didn't see any kind of a workload survey that was sent out broadly to the faculty. And as you know, it could be disciplinary, but there's definitely a gender skew in women will tend to keep their mouth shut until they can't stand it anymore, right? And so that women participate in questions that ask them to show vulnerability about their ability to succeed in the workplace only when they are asked, and then sometimes with great hesitation. So offering a survey, for instance, that actually gathers data widely has an equalizing effect that takes away a gender skew. And I don't know, maybe you did that and I just didn't answer that email. But there is that sense that I'm fearful of, that some voices may have privileged access to your ear and many other voices may not have that sense of a ready way to reach you. I hope that makes some sense.
It does. I mean, to be clear, the groups I was pulling, the groups I heard directly from, first of all, there's two different sources of data here. One is we've gotten it through the department chairs, through the deans, and into the provost office. So I've gotten that feedback unequivocal from that group. So there's been a lot of feedback that's come in to give us a sense of the extra load. There's the emergency planning advisory group, had a conversation with that group, and that group is a fairly, I could go through the membership that was announced much earlier in the year, and it was intended to be a very representative group from the very beginning. And I think I can say with some level of confidence that that group has gotten pretty comfortable speaking openly to me. So I never believe information to be totally unfiltered. Everybody's gonna be cautious in their comments, but they're pretty open with me about the concerns and the things that they're hearing. And a shout out to some of them who've done a really good job of going back into their schools and colleges and getting information around the issues that they've heard and felt and dealt with and bringing that back into that group. That's one of the charges of the group from the beginning. We did talk about this issue with the executive committee of the University Senate. So we've talked to a variety of different groups about it. You can always collect more data, right? I mean, you can always get more information, but I feel pretty clear on the understanding that the workload associated with the hybrid is significantly higher than that associated with fully face-to-face or fully online. I've gotten nothing but unequivocally clear information about that.
May I just clarify one thing as a member of the emergency committee? I just for clarification, we did not talk about that prior to the announcement because we didn't have a meeting.
Right.
So we hadn't met for 6 weeks. So we did talk about it after the announcement came out, but we weren't part of the decision or providing input because we didn't have a meeting during that time. So that announcement came out on September 30th and we did have a meeting on October 7th when we talked about it. So just want a clarification.
Steve, you might address the ADA concern. I know you and I talked about this earlier, but I don't think, the full Senate wasn't party to that discussion.
Yeah, and I almost wish Erin Katzberg was on the phone or the line so she could clarify some of that.
He was here.
Yeah, so I may have Erin jump in as well.
Address it too.
Erin, do you want to talk a little bit about it? Because I was channeling a little bit of you when we had this conversation before, so I want to make sure I let you speak about it appropriately.
Sure. So I think there's kind of two aspects to this. One is with regard to, I think you had already kind of hit on the idea of kind of work equalization. So this was really intended to address the fairness piece of it that I think we were hearing a little bit of as far as, how the workload seemed to be significantly more onerous for those who were teaching in the hybrid fashion. But that also, if there were individuals who still needed accommodations, who had a disability under the ADA, that would still be processed through HR as any other normal accommodation request would.
So where was that announced? Where was it announced that there was a process in place for people to make that request?
You mean as far as the disability? I know there have been I don't know if it was a part of that specific announcement with regard to the online versus the hybrid teaching fashion, but that process always exists through HR for any employee who needs accommodation.
And I think that part of the issue here is that it's a little bit hazy about the accommodation thing, right? People who normally wouldn't be considered to be in the protected class of having a full-on disability are de facto disabled because of the infectious capacities of this virus. There are people then who are caregivers. So what I'm looking for in this set of questions is, what do I tell my constituents, right? Who were not asked, right? They didn't get any kind of access to talking about workload as far as I could tell, and who are very concerned about the ADA component. So what are the steps that they need to take if they are themselves at risk or caring for a family member who is at risk, so that they can get this same break of teaching load? I'm sure they'd be delighted to work with whoever to recreate it as a synchronous class, so that they have that more extended contact with students, or to check whatever, requirements are needed for that. But what do I tell them about how they go about getting that? If they go to HR, is that request going to be understood even though they're not within any legal portfolio of recognized ADA concerns?
So the accommodation we talked about that we would get excited about making if somebody, by the way, words matter here. So I don't think we're giving somebody a break by having them teach hybrid classes. That's actually, you could quibble with the way we did the survey, but I don't think many people would debate the fact that that is substantially more work. And I get the fact that people might want to do that because they have a passion to connect with students. So if somebody's in a situation where they would like to do that, it's an extra burden, but if they're willing to do it, we'd love to have them do so. We did talk about, we can make accommodations for additional protective equipment. We could think about ways we could schedule classes, anything we could do to make that mode of delivery more available to them. And the big piece would be enhanced personal protective equipment is something, is accommodation we'd be comfortable making.
So is that saying, and fair enough to call me out on imprecise language in terms of the notion of a break, but is what you're saying that folks who have, what do they need to do? Do they need to have a documented health situation in order to be given the same consideration? Do they need to, or are they, you're turning to protective equipment? Is that their option, right? To ask for more protective equipment, but they're out of luck now in terms of being covered by the kind of de facto extension of ADA that we had made this semester.
I don't know how they're out of luck. If they would like some extra help, they want to be in the classroom.
To clarify, thanks.
That's an accommodation we're happy to work
Thanks,
with them.
President Sandiford. I appreciate you clarifying that. What I mean by out of luck is that they will not be allowed to enjoy the privilege of having a 3-course load unless they are willing to be at least partly in classrooms. Is that correct?
So we are going down to 3-course loads for those that are willing to take on the extra burden of doing a hybrid course. That is correct. But again, this is a work equalization issue, and it's a recognition of the rather extreme extra effort. I mean, depending on who you talk to, it's anywhere from, X% to twice the amount of work, because you're really often running 2 classes in that one class at once. So again, this is an attempt to recognize that there's a substantial amount of extra work associated with doing a hybrid class.
President Sandiford, this is Megan Remmel from Political Science. So I want to be in the classroom, and I'm younger and healthier and therefore less concerned. And having been on campus this semester, I actually feel quite safe because it's pretty empty there. But my kind of frustration is less about the course load of this, though I obviously would probably prefer a 3-class load. My concern here is, and maybe this is a quirk of this particular semester with letting students opt into virtual learning much later, I want to be able to plan my classes. And I know that there's the potential of having to switch to go to an online setting, but that's something I can plan for. The having students kind of coming in and out of choosing to do virtual or not. I know I have some students who would love to be in an in-person class, and we have to do hybrid. So what I would want for spring semester registration in particular is to have classes where the professor tries to make it a dedicated course for students who intend to be on campus, and keep that one in person. And then so I'm teaching 2 sections of one class next semester. I'd love to have one that's dedicated to just all in person for students who want to be in person, and then have one that's either hybrid or all online. But instead of trying to do a mixture within classes is my concern. So I think with the course load thing certainly matters to me, but it's more the uncertainty or the changing dynamics every week of students opting in and out of classes that's, to me, making the course load a challenge, but that movement is what's actually making things much more difficult for me.
Boy, I totally hear you here. And that's something we've gotten good feedback. Thank you, Megan, for adding to the feedback on this. We've gotten good feedback on this issue as well. And one of the things, we have a group called the Virus Response Team. First of all, one of the things I've come to recognize is there are no good answers to how you deal with the pandemic. There are just perhaps better solutions than others. But boy, there's just every solution that we try to go down has negative ramifications. And I wish we had a golden bullet answer to this, but we just don't. It's just not there. But Megan, I hear you on this issue. We've gotten loud feedback on this piece as well. And we're talking about how we calm that down next semester, because it's been a while since I've been in the classroom, but I can only imagine how maddening it is to have people coming in and out on format. And one of the things we learned, and it was difficult to get a good sense of prevalence on this, but we heard and got good feedback that post-quarantine, some students were opting to stay virtual, but didn't even tell the faculty they were doing that. They just kind of showed up electronically instead of in person. And that's messy. So we're going to try to get that cleaned up next semester. The one thing that will still always be a little bit of a challenge, and I don't know how to get around this. I wish I had a good answer, and we'll continue to work on it. And if anybody has any good suggestions, let me know, because we're wide open to possibilities on this, is if you're running a class and then somebody, maybe not even in your class, but somebody tests positive and they're a close contact, they're going to suddenly be put in quarantine. And then they just became a virtual student. And unless your online classes and your face-to-face class are exactly paralleled, now we unfortunately have to go to a hybrid class again. And given our numbers now, the impact of that has been mitigated, because we've really, I think, gotten a nice handle, always knock on wood and say for now, on the number of positive tests on campus. They've been very, very low over the last couple of weeks, and we're hoping they stay that way. And I'm hoping to mitigate that issue, but I don't know how we eliminate it. And that's just the ugliness of trying to operate during a pandemic. But if anybody has any ideas, boy, we're wide open to possibilities there. A part of what by the way, Megan, what we're going to clamp down on a little bit is this ability to at any time suddenly decide that you're going to be virtual. That's brutal to the classes. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but we know we need to clamp down on that.
President Staniford.
Yeah.
This is Tony Bednikovic in mathematics. The idea of, and I'm teaching in person this semester.
Yeah.
This issue of compensating, incentivizing classroom teaching, the idea of course load is a little tricky.
Yeah.
It stirs up some bad feelings. I was going to suggest a couple of smaller incentives that might be considered to incentivize. One being, it'd be nice to have regular access to COVID testing.
Yeah.
Maybe every 2 weeks, if you're teaching the classroom, let it be well known that you are invited to have a COVID test.
But you mean the faculty member? Is that what you're talking about?
The faculty member.
Okay, great.
And secondly, this one gets a little tricky again, but class sizes are another issue with workload.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could incentivize with slightly smaller class sizes for in-person professors.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. I think we're continuing to try to figure out how to navigate this environment. The testing piece, I'm hopeful, is one we can work on. The testing protocol for COVID-19 changes by the day, would be a good way to describe it. And so we're hoping that we can get a more robust testing regime where we can say anybody can get tested anytime they want. And we're not there yet, but I'm hoping by next semester for sure we can be there. That's one of our goals.
Dr. Standiford?
Yeah.
This is Jim Muncie from the College of Business. And I want to mention something that a couple of different groups have mentioned to me. And that is the fact that, and I know right now it's really hard to look to the future, whatever you're just trying to deal with a huge crisis on hands. But there's those who are worried about the teaching load, but there are others who are very, very concerned about research. As you well know, and I know from a 40-year career, a 4-4 teaching load is a non-research teaching load.
Right.
If you are teaching 4-4, there is zero expectation for research. Yeah. And we sort of got messaged, not directly, but indirectly, that Bradley is adjusting the teaching expectation, the research expectations through, for example, the fact that you can postpone your tenure clock and everything. So I know that it appears, at least, that the administration is very sensitive to the fact that in the middle of this, we're probably not going to be able to do the research that we can.
Yeah.
The way I've sort of heard it said is that it appears as though for now, Bradley is a teaching school. It's not a balanced school. It is a teaching school for now. We're on 4-4 loads. That's the standard load. You're getting offloaded to a 3-hour teaching load, but that's not so that you can go do research. That's so you can survive the hybrid type approach. What the concern I've heard is when are we going to get back into an environment that is more reflective of a balanced institution than a teaching school?
So Jim, there's a great chance for me to go on record. I know Walter said this before, but I'll personally go on record. I'm a big fan of the teacher-scholar model. So that's where we need to get back to that, right? So that's I pick my own bias. If you look at my background, that's how I lived my career, and I saw great value in that, and that's where I wanted to get us back to. You all know this, but just a reminder, we're operating in a pandemic, and it has turned the world upside down. And that's just a nice way. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just turned the world upside down. So it's put a lot of strain on a lot of things. And we're obviously, we feel it very much here. The whole world's feeling it in a lot of different ways. And so we'll get back there. When we get back there, I wish I could predict when the pandemic is going to be over. I have some thoughts on that. I think we got to get through next semester. I was actually joking with the senior leadership team. We're all going to get certificates in epidemiology when this is done, because we've learned far more about viruses than we ever wanted to know. And of course, I'm sure all of you have seen this and heard it as well. There's not going to be a sudden day where the pandemic's over, right? It's going to be a curve where as the vaccine comes out and starts having its impact and et cetera, et cetera. But depending on who you read and who you ask, it'll be first, second term next year, depending on the availability of the vaccine. So I think we got to get through next semester before things get back to something that resembles a normal, which is why we've got to give some breaks on the research. And I feel your pain, because then, of course, then you're off track, and it's not like on Monday you start back on research and you get completely caught back up. And I'm sensitive to that, which is why we're trying to be thoughtful around the clocks as well.
So do you have, could I tell the people, you have a deep commitment for us getting back to the balanced institution
absolutely
as quickly as possible after the pandemic, because there seemed to be some indication that part of this was due to the pandemic, but that other part of it was due to structural problems. I know I have a daughter that teaches at Baylor. She's a professor at Baylor, and she's kept her teaching load the same there. throughout this. They didn't have to raise their teaching loads, and other schools too. Is it just getting past the pandemic that we're going to be able to get back to the balanced institution? Or do we have to get past the pandemic and then past a bunch of other stuff before we get back to being able to be more of a balanced institution?
Well, we have to get past the pandemic, but I will say, and I don't anticipate this being the case, but let's say, for example, that there was and I don't want to be making predictions, right? Because this is not I'll leave it to your econ colleagues to make predictions on this. But if the economy totally collapses and our enrollment plummets by 40%, I don't think it's going to. I don't think anybody's predicting that. But I'm so careful to never say never. Okay, because that's just, I don't want to ever be disingenuous. But the absolute intent is to get back to something that resembles normal operation as soon as the pandemic is over. And I would say, the only caveat I would say, that assumes that it doesn't so unbelievably tank the economy that we're all trying to figure out how to survive. And I don't think it will. I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to make that prediction. I'll leave that to your colleagues to make those predictions, but that's
Thank you very much.
Christina Quaid, Chemistry and Biochemistry. I just would like to comment that I'm very aware of these workload differences that have been caused by COVID-19. And, there are folks who are working harder than they ever have before, whether they're doing online, face-to-face, hybrid, high flex, whatever. And it's very difficult to compare, and people are going to get, protective, defensive, et cetera. These workload differences have existed prior to COVID-19. It's important to acknowledge that as well. But I feel compelled to note that up till now, during this meeting, we've only been talking about workload and have not mentioned, not once, student learning. And the differences in student learning may not be directly related to the mode of delivery. I mean, in a simplistic way, like face-to-face versus online. And I think it's really important to give some freedom, creativity, some power back to the departments, the colleges, to try to figure out innovative ways to do a good job. And the simple model of 3 versus 4, I don't think cuts it. So Megan's idea, for example, this is the kind of thing that some of us have been thinking about, ways to give both the face-to-face students and the online students the experience that they deserve. And I don't think this model meets that. And I just want to make sure we spend some time thinking about that aspect as well. What's going to be best for the students, both the online and the face-to-face?
I think that's a dialogue worth continuing, Christy. And I know you brought this up in another venue, and I appreciate you doing so. And that's something I want to, I also want to give, I have to say, so I met with the parents panel or the parents board the other day, and I do want to share that they were quite complimentary with the quality of education given the chaos of the situation. And I'm use this, Chrissy, as an opportunity to share that, because I think that's an important piece. We'll continue to adjust as we move forward, as we have throughout the COVID crisis, trying to figure out what makes sense. So please know that we're continuing to think about possibilities. I think now that the schedule is out, we've somewhat locked into where we're at with what's happening next semester, but we'll continue to make adjustments as we learn what would work better in different environments. And again, I just greatly value the input, but also please recognize there are no good answers on how to operate in a pandemic. There are just better answers than others, and we'll just continue to push away at it to come up with solutions that make sense. I am so looking forward to next year, by the way. We'll continue to get through this year, and it's been a good year in other ways, right? We'll continue to survive, but I'm looking forward to getting to the point where we can, to Jim's comment, get back to something that resembles a little bit more normalcy. But we still need to get through next semester. By the way, I'll just use this, and I know it's exhausting. I know everybody's tired. And again, a chance for me to say thank you for all the work that everybody's doing. None of this is easy for any of us. And again, just thank you. What I'm hearing is this: we know the students are stressed. We know everybody is, the whole world is. But the feedback I'm getting is that despite their stress, despite their anxiety, things are generally going well in class. And that's a real compliment to you all for somehow, in the madness of this all, doing as good a job as we can in the classroom. And I, again, just want to say thank you to everybody for doing that.
I'm going to step in here. I'm going to have to leave in just a minute. I think we've had a good discussion with President Standiford, but we should probably let the provost give his report. And as he starts, I'm going to check out. And so Teresa will be chairing the responsibilities for the remainder of the meeting. If you're still going on about 5 o'clock, I will try to check back in.
That's great.
I'll try not to feel slighted by your departure, Matt.
Okay, Walter. So thank you. Thank you for your forbearance with letting me check out here too.
I have a relatively short report. President Standiford and I have a fair amount of overlap in the kinds of things that we might have been talking about today. I did want to share with you some information regarding the thinking behind the spring schedule. I suspect most of you could deduce the reason for the changes in the spring schedule, but I wanted to share it nonetheless. If you haven't heard, we shared this message with the entire campus. We canceled spring break and we are starting the semester a week later. And so the reasons for doing that have everything to do with the virus. So I think the reason for canceling spring break is obvious. We don't want students leaving campus, going home, or going and going to the beach with large groups, et cetera, having the kind of fun that they would normally have during spring break, and then bringing virus back to campus. And so we knew from an early period on that our plan was to cancel spring break. We are pretty much like many other universities in the country with that plan. One of the things that I haven't mentioned to the virus team is that now we're going to have to think about how to deal with students who are on campus during St. Patrick's Day. But that's a problem for another day. Just as we have Halloween coming up, then in the spring we've got St. Patrick's Day to deal with. The reason for starting a week later is obviously we want to account for the week of spring break, and the choice between starting a week later or finishing a week earlier was also dictated by our knowledge of what we believe about the virus, and that is, we believe that it's going to be better to have people on campus. Well, we would like to delay having people on campus if we can. Our sense is the longer we go into the spring, the better things are going to be. So starting a week later is better than starting at the time we'd originally planned. And our finish is such that we can, rather than finishing a week early, rather than taking the time off at the end of the semester, in general, just pushing the calendar out a little bit later seems to be a better plan around what we anticipate is going to happen around the virus, and hopefully what we anticipate is going to happen around the availability of things like vaccines. I want to reiterate that something the president mentioned. My second item is the dean searches. We have a consultant who will be working with us on the 3 dean searches, and those are going to start next week with faculty, staff, and student listening sessions for the College of Engineering. Similar listening sessions will are engineering and business, excuse me, colleges of engineering, and the College of Engineering, the College of Business. And then the other colleges where we have searches will come in the weeks to follow. The reason we want to stagger this is we don't want to have everything going on at once, and we certainly don't want to have overlapping visits. Hopefully we'll be having visits by candidates to campus in the spring where we've got the culmination of 3 searches happening simultaneously on campus. That creates an impossible situation. And so by staggering these out on the front end, then we can stagger them out hopefully on the back end as well. But those processes are starting, and we'll start to share information about listening sessions next week. The last thing I want to mention is that over the next couple of weeks, we have accreditation review teams on campus for nursing and for the Foster College of Business. When I say teams, I should say these are occurring virtually, and we may have. Well, actually, I don't know that we have anybody coming physically to campus, and so I apologize for that. I'm kind of used to thinking about accreditation visits in a certain way. Molly or Matt O'Brien, if you're on the call, do we have anybody coming to campus for these, or are they all virtual? Can you remind me?
Nursing is totally virtual.
Okay, thank you.
Foster College of Business will be completely virtual as well.
Okay, so I misspoke when I said they'd be on campus, but they'll be going through their accreditation reviews here over the next couple of weeks. The Caterpillar College of Engineering virtual visit will be occurring early in the spring semester during the month of February. So we have a number of these going on, and then I would remind you that we have our accreditation process with HLC that will culminate with a virtual visit, although we will have one person live on campus in April. And so we have a variety of accreditation efforts that are going on over the coming weeks. And that's it. I'm certainly happy to try and answer questions for you.
Walter, this is Eden Blair from ETL.
Yes.
I was wondering if my dogs are about to bark. I can hear it. Okay. Have we considered getting rid of course evaluations this semester?
We have not. So the chairs have received or are in the process of receiving some guidance from the Promotion, Tenure, and Dismissal Committee with some suggestions about how they approach this. That information was shared with the deans, and the deans were going to share that information with the chairs. We have a variety of issues as to why we are concerned. We've had a conversation among the deans about this, and ultimately we decided that we needed to continue some kind of review process. Among the things that are possibilities would be that even though we have offered a stop the clock option for untenured faculty, it is at their option, and so if they want to move forward with a promotion and tenure process, it probably is in their best interest to also have some kind of review process, both teacher evaluations and annual review in place for that. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I think the worry is that the evaluation is going to be on the pandemic and how we handled it versus, did we actually meet the learning objectives of class effectively?
And so among the things, I mean, there's information in the guidance provided by the Promotion, Tenure, and Dismissal Committee around these kinds of issues in the documents that they shared. And among the things is some boilerplate language kind of recognizing that we are in an exceptional period of time and that we've changed. And so you heard the conversation earlier about the 4-course load and recognizing, for example, that scholarship is, there's a good chance that scholarship is going to suffer or stop as a result of this, which is one of the reasons for providing faculty with the stop the clock option. I could see where a faculty member who is up for tenure and promotion this year or just promotion this year might choose to move forward because of the timing of the things regarding COVID, where we stopped live classes back in March. People may have lost access to their labs back in March. but many people would have had their plans and their documentation essentially lined up and felt that they were ready to go before COVID and don't want to delay the option of promotion and tenure.
Thank you very much.
I understand.
Yeah, thanks.
Provost Akahi, this is Travis Stern from the Department of Theater Arts. I was wondering if you could speak for just a moment, if there was any consideration given to student mental health in the elimination of spring break for the spring semester. Certainly this is about student physical health and the physical health of the campus, but could you talk a little bit about that? We're seeing some ramifications of eliminating the fall break this semester. So could you talk about what that process was?
So we're talking about that a little bit now. I'm going to be frank with you in that I wasn't thinking about the stressors on students in terms of having a break when we started this process, and I understand the concerns about it. I'll be frank with you. I have such deep concerns about their physical well-being around this that while I understand mental health is equally important, and I don't doubt that, the challenges of physical health are with this virus are such, not only for them but for all of us, that I was really primarily focused on those challenges in doing this. Now, we've had a number of conversations. We are talking about what are some options that we may have around issues regarding mental health. I will share one of the stressors that people have talked about, and more than anything, I'm not saying this is what's going on. It may be that you have different views on this, but it's one of those things that I've talked about with the deans, and I'm wondering. I know that we encourage the faculty to do more asynchronous rather than synchronous teaching. A lot of that had to do with basically our network backbone and our ability to support simultaneous synchronous instruction, let's say at 10 o'clock on Tuesday and Thursday for the entire campus. A number of people have gone to synchronous teaching. What I'm wondering about is whether or not, out of fear of, out of concern of making sure that I'm covering the equivalent of a 15-week semester with asynchronous teaching, that I've provided more instruction, more work, et cetera, than I might have done in the past. I was thinking back to my own teaching. I might have done that in this situation. And if you take that experience and multiply it by 3 or 4 classes, it's entirely possible that the students are feeling a bit overwhelmed because we're trying to make sure that we've provided enough instruction. I'm going to suggest that as you look at next semester, you take a look at that and see if you're doing asynchronous teaching, whether or not that's a possibility that maybe you've provided in order to ensure you were teaching the equivalent of a 15-week semester. Maybe we've erred a little bit on the high side out of fear of erring on the low side. I don't know that that's happening, but I've had feedback from students. I've had feedback from administrators whose children are students at Bradley who are communicating they're feeling like the workload is heavier than they've had in the past. So if we could try, in a sense, to figure out how to balance that workload out for students, I think it'll decrease some of the stress. But I don't have, in the short term, I don't have an answer. I will tell you it's one of the points of conversation we're having around spring semester. I will also tell you I wouldn't change the decision around canceling spring break at this point, because I just think that the dangers associated with it are huge.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Travis. I'm assuming if you're going to ask a question, you'll just jump in rather than raise your hand, because I can't see all the hands. There are about 3 or 4 screens. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your attention.
All right, I think the COO is up next.
Great. Thank you all.
Nice to be with you this afternoon. I just have one thing to report on briefly, and that's the progress that we're making with Huron Consulting and looking at administrative functions. So as I think I'd mentioned before on previous call, we're in the midst of a what will ultimately be somewhere between a 14 and 16 week process. We're about halfway through. We have 5 working groups that represent everything from overall general administration, finance, IT, HR, marketing, and communications. And we have cross-functional teams for each of those. So each of the last 6 or 7 weeks have been filled with a number of Zoom meetings. There has been a lot of data gathering on current state of various aspects of the processes and organization and service delivery in each of those functions. We're in addition to that, outside of the working group Zoom calls, there have been Huron Consulting has been conducting a number of interviews with various stakeholders across the university. So we're beginning to turn from the data gathering, the current state, to what would we like to see in the future, and how should we be organized, what process improvements, what systems enhancements do we need to contemplate to have more effective and efficient administrative functions across the university. So that's where we're currently at. I would anticipate that in the next month, so perhaps at our next Senate meeting, would like to go into a little bit more detail of what we're actually finding and what we're proposing. But so far, it's been excellent discussions, very, very high level of engagement, a lot of really good ideas being surfaced on how we can work more efficiently and effectively, provide a higher level of service delivery. And as you might imagine, one of the key elements of that is information technology and our underlying systems as a university. So part of what will emerge from this work with is an IT roadmap for the future. So again, we're just about to formulate recommendations and solutions. So don't have anything to report on that front yet, but there will be a comprehensive information technology recommendation coming out of this work. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions if anyone has any.
Jeff, this is Jeannie Bukowski, International Studies. We had discussed, I believe at the last Senate meeting and maybe prior to that, the possibility of providing the complete Huron report to the University Resources Committee, the Senate committee. Is that still being considered?
Yeah, still being considered. I don't think we have any objection. What we might want to consider is whether the findings from the spring is more relevant, or if we want to wait a little while until the actual recommendations of these working committees, because the work that was done in the spring by Huron was to do some fact finding and some background and a set of recommendations for us to consider. We've now essentially gone forward with that work. So we thought that the recommendations, which really centered around the efficiency and effectiveness of our administrative functions, and specifically on things like the extent to which there is duplication of work, the degree to which it's decentralized versus centralized, and being able to be done in a more efficient, effective manner, staffing levels, underlying systems. So no objection to sharing their recommendations in the spring. But we should have some discussion, because I think it would be more relevant to wait a little bit of time. We're not talking about that many more weeks or months to have actually formulated recommendations, which I think will actually be more relevant and useful.
Hi, Jeff. This is Naomi Stover from Biology. As you make recommendations for IT changes, like in the past, I don't know if you were here for this, but there was a move to get rid of Qualtrics, for example. I know it got a little pricey, but there was a big backlash and stuff like that. As you look at new IT for the campus, will the faculty and everybody else be consulted?
Yes, the answer is yes. What we're trying to ensure, first of all, in the working teams, we have pretty good cross-functional representation of a lot of the stakeholder customer groups that those functions serve. It's not 100%, not everything is completely represented, but we do have a good cross-section. And any of the recommendations, the spirit of which we're approaching this is that any recommendations that we're putting forward, we want to make sure that we have good stakeholder buy-in. So this is not, there is no intent or desire to do this in a silo that will not serve the customers. And that's actually part of this work that we've tried to infuse, is this idea of administrative functions that have internal, mostly internal, some external, but mostly internal customers, including other staff functions, faculty, students, parents, et cetera. So very much of a stakeholder model. And that's the intent, is to get input so that we're implementing solutions that have wide pull rather than trying to force something.
Okay, great, thanks.
Jeff, I have a question for you, and I think you answered it as you went along. This is Danielle. You were referring to stakeholders and customers, and then you did clarify that faculty are part of that group, right? So I would just like to make sure that, because I don't think of myself as a customer, right? So just to make sure that one of the things that's being carefully considered is that the faculty are the people, other people need to use technology across campus, but the faculty's need for technology is especially crucial and may be quite different from other more traditional business models, insofar as that we have to actually be able to interpret and teach the students how to use the technology. So just to clarify, that is what you're saying, even though you're using language that is unfamiliar to me. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Jeff, this is Ahmad Fakari. Could you provide some information about the process by which these committees are put together? How are the membership drawn, and how do we go about selecting the individuals who end up on these committees?
We had a lot of discussion. So the functional leaders, so the IT committee is chaired by Zach Gorman, marketing and communication by Jim Crone, the human resource by Crystal Elliott, administrative by Dee Carmichael, finance by Dee Carmichael. So we had a lot of discussion, debate with the folks from Huron Consulting, who have also done this work across a number of colleges and universities. So part of the reason we felt comfortable continuing with Huron to actually help us formulate specific recommendations and actions is they've done this at a lot of universities. One member of the consulting team, all of the members of the consulting team have some level of background in academia. The person we're working with most closely has spent most of his career in an academic setting. So there's been a lot of consideration to making sure we have good cross-functional representation on these teams of members across the university. And again, will it be perfect? No. That's why once we have a set of recommendations, and we haven't developed the criteria yet, but we will, for how we will share the recommendations and identification of key stakeholders and input that's needed from the university, because these were intended to be representative working teams, but also smaller working teams, so that we could coordinate schedules and we could have good discussion and debate, which is hard to do when the group gets too big. So the groups were targeted, each of the group teams were targeted at between 5 and 7 participants, plus myself and consultants. So we have about 10-ish folks on each of these calls.
Maybe something that would be useful is try to do an analysis of lessons learned from what we did in Beck. And so are there lessons that we can learn from the significant expenditure of resources on the technology in that building? And are there things that we would do differently? And I think the faculty members who actually use those equipment would be a good source of information.
Good. Thank you. It's good input.
I think I have a follow-up on Ahmad's question, which is just to clarify. So since, you know, education is our business, it's what we sell, it's what we market, right? Are faculty robustly represented on these working groups?
They are represented, it depends on the working group. So not every one of them has, you know, as you might imagine, human resources, which has a lot of underlying process issues and technology issues. I don't think is as faculty heavy as some of the others like IT. Just to follow up on my previous comment, nothing will be implemented without strong consideration and input from all stakeholder groups. So this will not be something that is delivered up or done to faculty or staff or any stakeholder group that hasn't been consulted in a proper way.
Hi, Jeff. I have a question that's completely unrelated to this subject, and it may not even be you that's the right person to ask, but I'm just wondering, do we know what fraction of residential students have left housing, and how that's going to impact our budget and how we're going to handle the financial losses that have arisen due to that?
So in terms of exact numbers, I would defer to Nathan if he's on the call. But in terms of, we have had a number of students who have chosen to during the semester go online exclusively. So we have processed a number of housing and dining credits. On the dining side, we're working very closely with Sue Boddicker and the Aramark team. Pretty much weekly calls to make sure that we're understanding it. So the nice thing is when you're feeding fewer students, if you're on top of it, you're adjusting labor and food cost accordingly. And so we've been working very closely with Aramark. We have a great partnership with them, and we are working to mitigate any impact of fewer students. On housing, we have processed number of housing credits, and you know, as part of the budget that we put together for this year, as you'll recall, we included $1 million in the budget specifically for COVID-related expenses. So a combination of IT, PPE, a number of other things that we knew we would incur. And then we had a $2 million general contingency just because we knew we were going to be operating in an environment with high level of uncertainty. And so some of the things on housing, and we're still analyzing it to understand the impact. Some of that we you know, this to me would fall into that category of one of the unknowns when we started, but we constructed a budget knowing that there would be things that we couldn't anticipate when the semester started. For second semester, we're in the early stages of having the conversation that if we have a similar number of students not coming back, you know, do you try and concentrate them in particular housing facilities and not have to use others or floors of others so that you can save the expense? Because in the spring, when students completely left campus, there were substantial savings from operating those buildings, whether it's heating and cooling or supplies or you name it. So there's actually an ability to offset a lot of the expense. But we're also having that debate versus, do you use it as an opportunity to actually spread students out so that the spread of COVID-19 is mitigated, et cetera. So again, to Steve's earlier comment, there are no easy answers on all this, but we're navigating through it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, we'll get the report from Student Body President Emma Hoytia.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Day. I'm the Speaker of the Assembly, and I'll be filling in for Emma. She could not make it today. And so she's left a couple things that she wanted to address, and so I'll address those for her. Firstly, she begins by talking about just how unprecedented, of course, we know that this semester and that this year is going to be. And I'd like to thank Professor Stern for raising a point that I'm getting ready to raise again about the mental health, the physical well-being of students. It's no secret that going completely through the year, the semester with no break, it takes quite a toll on the students. And so we're just simply asking that as we finish out this semester and as we prepare to go into the next semester with this hybrid model, possibly all online model, that professors are becoming more creative in the way that they allow students to recharge. And because going full steam ahead from the beginning is a bit tough for many students. And so just getting creative in the way that we allow students to take a little mental break. And she suggested here maybe a weekend of no homework, maybe allowing class time to be utilized for work to be done that's not new instruction per se. Just anything that can be done to allow students that opportunity to recharge would be helpful to the overall health of students. So just to update you on some of the current efforts that the Student Senate is pursuing, one of our main initiatives at the moment is advocating for pass-fail, the pass-fail option. And so we're advocating for the implementation of pass-fail grading scale for the current semester. And similar to what we experienced last semester of spring 2020, that it's an unprecedented time. It's a very uncertain time, and we're working under very intense circumstances. And so we feel that having that option for students will allow some relief and to improve our ability to succeed. We had a discussion. There were some representatives from the Student Senate that had an opportunity to speak before the provost and all of the deans of all of the college. And they presented a presentation. So that presentation can be available to anybody who is wanting to know some of the data that we collected and some of the points that we made in advocating for the pass-fail option. You can reach out to Emma and she will be able to get you that material. So we've advocated to the deans, to the provost, and we're committed to doing everything we can to advocate further. So that we do eventually see the implementation of a pass-fail option this semester. Just as a brief note, talking about some of those materials, we did conduct a poll in which 90% of respondents did support the implementation of a pass-fail option. And there's also a separate petition circulating advocating for a pass-fail option. Some of the short-term projects that we're pursuing by some of our different committees, we're pursuing Title IX education for all of our students. We received a Title IX training and presentation from Crystal Elliott and Ann Hollis before the Student Senate, but we're trying to get that on a much broader scale, make it available to the entire campus at some point. We're also working on a Black Lives Matter campaign in conjunction with some Black student organizations on campus. We're also working on some pre and post-election planning in an effort to neutrally promote civility and tolerance, because we know that this year has been quite quite the year, and that there are very much opportunities for an explosive nature following this election. So we want to make sure that our campus is as civil and as tolerant as can be. And then, of course, I know that it's weighing heavy on all of our minds. Halloween is coming up. And so far, after our quarantine, we've done pretty well with mitigating some of the social gatherings, the spread of the coronavirus. But I do know that Halloween gives a lot of us pause. So we're working to get some messaging out there from students to students about how to stay safe, not gathering, not hosting large events, just so that we can make it to that threshold that we set in November. So that is all I have. I certainly, if anybody did have questions for me about what we're doing, what we're pursuing, or just what you might want to hear from a student's perspective, I'm definitely happy to entertain some of those questions.
Danielle, I'm going to let other people ask questions, but first of all, thank you. That was a really wonderful presentation. When you all dig into this idea of developing civility, civil dialogue, let me know how I can participate, because that's something that is and should always be a core principle of who we are, right? We should always be able to engage in civil dialogue, and that's something. Love to be a participant in helping. Thank you to the student government for thinking about that, and let me know how we can help.
Great, thank you.
This is Jeannie Bukowski, International Studies. Thanks so much, David. I just also would like to add to President Standiford's comments. I think consulting with Brad McMillan and the Institute for Principled Leadership, it would also be really good. If you have not done so already, they've got so many resources that they could help you with, and I'm sure they would like to partner.
Great, yes, thank you.
If I may ask the body to permit Tim Kulso to speak. He's not a senator. I guess I would ask for, what do you ask for, Teresa? So I move that Tim Kulso be allowed to speak.
Second.
Aye.
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 Nay.
You have the floor.
Thank you for that. I think not having fall break was unexpectedly just gut punchy for everybody involved. For faculty, I know it's typically a time to get caught up on grading. I am honestly behind on every asset of my life, and I see no hope of getting caught up anytime soon. I know students are feeling the same way. To that extent, and following up on something that David said, I'm wondering if we might, instead of simply being mindful in the spring semester, I agree with the provost that having spring break and the travel and everything that might come from that is not a good idea. But I'm wondering if we might be able to identify a first Monday, a third Tuesday, a fifth Thursday, or something like that of the semester, where we kind of agree that it's just a holiday, and students and faculty can take that time knowing that it's not just that my kids won't have class that day, but the whole campus will take a breath. And if we could stagger those across the semester, I suggest that we might be able to find a little bit more sanity through that 14-week marathon that otherwise is just going to be difficult. So that would be my recommendation, and I hope the right folks can give that some thought. Thank you, everybody.
Great, really love that. Thank you.
We hear you on that, Tim, by the way. And so we've been having those conversations, just to let you know we're thinking about that. The one dance we have to do, and this is a horrible reason to have to do this, but the Department of Education has some pretty tough standards on hours and all that kind of good stuff that we'll have to be careful about how we follow that. But there's got to be a creative way around that. And so we just got to figure out what that is. Yep.
David, this is Dan Matisa in Theater Arts. Thank you so much for your comments. A few minutes ago, we heard the provost say that perhaps teachers may have, in this semester, it's possible that they may have provided more work in an attempt to err too much on, as he said, the high side of instruction. Are you hearing from the students that is the case, that this is sort of for them maybe an overloaded semester as compared to others?
Overwhelmingly so. I will say that is one of the main, I get frequent people telling me that because we have to understand that sometimes more time doesn't mean more time, if that makes sense. That while we do have a lot of free time at our, in our dorms and in our homes, that doesn't mean that we have more available time to work and do schoolwork. People are taking on full-time jobs sometimes, or part-time jobs to support themselves. They're still having student organizations, activities, things that they're participating in that still take up quite a bit of time, that I think there's been an oversight in many regards on how we're managing our time. So just to answer the question, yes, I have heard that resoundingly throughout the campus.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you.
I think up next we have reports from standing committees. CNR.
I don't believe there is any report from CNR. I think CNR met 2 days ago, and so we will have some items for the next meeting.
All right, good enough. It's on the agenda. We'll move on to TPD.
Okay, I guess I'm going to be speaking on behalf of TPD. Could you, are you going to share that motion or? Okay, while Trisha is sharing the motion, by the way, I'm a member of the Tenure Promotion and Dismissal Committee, and I was asked to provide the rationale for this, and I'll be happy to do so. As you know, the probationary faculty were offered either a 2-year extension or a 1-year extension, depending on when they started working at Bradley in response to the COVID and all of the changes that have happened since last spring. And so having a 2-year extension is not exactly in conformity with our handbook, which only allows a 1-year extension to the probationary period. As it is stated in the handbook, our probationary period is 6 years. And during the 6th year, faculty members apply for tenure, and then they are going to know whether or not they receive tenure, and if they don't, then there is a 1-year extension to it. And so the motion in front of you is essentially allow certain faculty, those who were hired prior to this fall, the option of having up to 2 years of probationary period. And this is a one-time deal, so we are not asking for the change in handbook, just to make sure that we are okay in terms of the handbook language. I do understand that there are concerns about why we are requiring faculty to, or what was a rationale for requiring faculty to announce early. And I think it was primarily because of the fact that a fixed, fairly inflexible probationary period has been a bedrock of the tenure process, probably for the last 80 years. I guess we came in the AAUP's position back in the 1940s. And they have pretty much stuck with it. And the reason that we asked, and so generally speaking, right at the start, you would know how long is your probationary period. If you have had work experience in an accredited university, that probationary period may be reduced, but nonetheless, you get a probationary period, you don't get to choose when you want to go up for tenure. And so in light of that, and the feeling that we pretty much faculty members should know what has been, or to a great extent, should know what has been the impact of all of these disruptions on their progress towards tenure, we decided that early on they need to make a decision. And it is a question of fairness for those who are going to be starting work in fall of 2021. That then they are going to be essentially competing with individuals who have had 1 or 2 years head start. And not having the option to optimize when you want to go up for tenure has not been available, and we felt that we probably shouldn't be available. And so that was a rationale. So that's the motion in front of you. I'll be happy to answer questions.
So Ahmad, this is Danielle. Just to clarify, I think that in some conversations that I was in, our conversations focused on the matter of the date for declaring the extension. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, the intent of this motion is to make space for the 2-year possibility when our handbook only makes room for a 1-year extension. So basically I'm asking, what is it that is new from the provost's declared statement in the spring? What is it that's new that the TPND committee is trying to capture here? Can you highlight that?
Sure. One of them is that our handbook does not allow a 2-year extension. And it only allows a 1-year extension for very specific reasons. And those are all spelled out in the handbook, and having a pandemic is not one of them. And so we are trying to basically carve out the exception, an additional exception, but that is only a temporary exception. So that is one. The other question was about what exactly does a stop the clock mean? And so some had interpreted that originally as a stop the clock means that this year is not going to count. No matter what you did, is not going to count. And so last spring would also not count. And so that was not the intent. I think at least the way we interpreted it was that what we were talking about is essentially extending the probationary period. Probationary faculty are appointed to a 6-year probationary period. And so now we are providing them the option of extending that either by 1 or 2 years. Their work cumulatively is going to count in those 7 or 8 years. When they go up for tenure, they can go up or promotion. So that was the intent. Now, in the case of, there is also a difference here. In the case of the exceptions that are in the handbook for that 1-year extension, I think they are allowed to choose the extension up until maybe, I don't remember, maybe up until the April of the year that they go up. And at least we sort of thought that it is because many of these changes could happen right that last year. So you could get, I don't know, you could get pregnant, or you could have a family emergency, or all of that would be justifiable to extend the probationary period. The reason that we are providing this extension right now is that the reason is clear. Pandemic has happened. You pretty much know how far behind you are, or how much it has impacted you, and whether or not you think you're going to be on track or not. So make your decision.
Ahmad, this is Megan Rummel. I'm asking this as someone who should, if I stay on schedule, go up for tenure next year. And so I just want to be 100% clear that I'm understanding what this means. So if I were to have a 1-year or 2-year extension of my probationary period, I want clarification. I just want this kind of explicitly stated that the expectations, especially the research expectations, would be the same for me, that they would not somehow be higher if I take the 1 or 2-year extension.
I think that is the intent. I think the idea is that there definitely has been disruption. And so we cannot expect the same thing that we had expected in the past when there was no disruption, or the teaching loads were different. And so I suspect that your colleagues who are going to be judging you would be cognizant of that fact. And so I don't think that anybody is expecting the expectations to go up. At least that would be me if I were judging a probationary faculty.
I agree. I feel like it needs to be explicit that the standards don't change.
Megan, that's certainly my expectation in this as provost, that the expectations shouldn't change. That was my expectation when I made the initial communication. This is the kind, I think you could move to amend the resolution here around this if you want it that explicit. But I believe the deans and I are in agreement that this was put in place because of the extraordinary circumstances, and that we believe that you should be judged on the same kind of clock that you would have been judged on before this. That is, where we have only an expectation around the 6 years rather than around, let's say, 8 years.
Okay, then the other question that I've gotten from other probationary faculty members is, how does the change in teaching load interact with research expectations? So if we came in with the expectation that we needed to have X number of publications by the time we go up for tenure, but now our teaching load has increased from a 3.3 to a 4.4 or something like that, how, even though that's not necessarily going to be our teaching load for the entirety of our probationary periods, how do those two factors interact with each other?
Well, what should happen is, and that's part of the reason for the extension, what should happen is that your teaching load should return to normal. And then you should have arguably 6 normal years to work on your scholarship.
So does the teaching load issue need to also be a part of this motion, that it's on the assumption that you return to the prior teaching load? And that while you're on this this higher level teaching load, that the research expectations are either going to be on pause or they're going to be reduced, kind of to Jim's question earlier about the fact that a 4.4 load makes research rather challenging.
I'm comfortable with that as a change, but that would be up to your colleagues in terms of making a decision about making that kind of change.
If I may add to it, I think this is based on the assumption that last spring, this fall, and next spring are going to be the exception. That come next fall, things are going to be going back to normal. If next fall is going to be the same, then there is nothing that says we cannot come back and revisit this issue. That if it turns out we either have to change our expectations totally, that we are now a teaching school, and so the research expectations should change. If we continue having 4.4 and you have to do this high flex and all of the associated increased workload on faculty, we either have to come back and revisit the criteria for tenure and promotion, or we have to maybe provide another extension. I don't know. I mean, but right now, this is just to remedy what has happened last spring, and it's likely going to happen this year. I guess to some extent, it has already happened this fall.
Ahmad, this is John Nielsen from the History Department. Following up on Megan's comments, I'm completely behind the sentiments here. My one concern is that this could extend the probationary period for tenure track faculty. And as we learned at the last Senate meeting, probation now in the eyes of the administration offers no protection to probationary faculty. They might be incentivized to get those 6 years done as soon as possible. In which case, do we need to modify the expectations if they want to go up after 6 years?
I think that's a good point. But I think they are not related. I think that issue of whether or not probationary faculty can be dismissed without cause should be separated from this issue. That faculty members, in my view, and I think views of many, but that is not part of this conversation. In my view and views of many, probationary faculty's term of appointment is 6 years. And so there should not be too much room for dismissing them without cause. Obviously, you can not renew if it starts from the department level, and if you realize that there is not the right fit or this individual is not going to be working out, but that's a separate matter. I don't think that we should confuse the two issues.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ahmad, I share those concerns, but I have another concern. My concern is with the requirement in the proposed language that people opt in or opt out. I understood from the provost's original offer that they would be automatically opted in, and that they would, the way they would opt out of that is just to put their binders in at the expected time. That would opt them out. And I thought that was a much better system than this language for this reason. Now beyond, it's well beyond faculty members' control that many journals are now running way, way behind on their review process. So faculty are it's taking so much longer to hear back of whether you've got your things published, and they might not know until relatively soon before they're supposed to put their binder in, whether they've met what a comfortable amount of publications for tenure. So I think that this puts an undue burden on junior faculty to commit sort of sooner than they should have to commit, given that these are circumstances well beyond their control.
Yeah, it's Megan Rummel. I'm on month 7 of one publication under review and in month 5 of another. And I've contacted the journal editors, and there's no end in sight for that length of time. So I genuinely don't know what position I'll be in.
This is Danielle. I would add to that, that I would imagine that the financial fallout from this year is going to have an impact, as it did in the last economic downturn in 2007 and 2008, a fallout effect of venues where we have published in the past and conferences that we've attended in the past, even when we're able to see each other and live relatively normal lives again. The economic fallout is sort of more of a downstream effect, and that it might not be clear for some time what the ways that's going to tighten the publication market and make publication even more challenging, or the ways in which publication may change shape.
Yes, so, I would say that I would be in support of this language, except for the last 2 lines. I would just simply omit the last 2 lines. And I apologize, by the way, I have another thing that I have to go to in about 5 minutes. So I don't think that I'm rushing off in a huff or something.
I hear that. I mean, we try to we consider all of these issues. We try to be consistent with the spirit of probationary period, that we have never given the option to any probationary faculty to go up when they feel like it for tenure. And so that was intended in that. But I fully hear what you're saying. And I have no objection if you want to amend it, but I'm perfectly fine with that. But I just wanted to let you know where this was coming from.
This is Ulrich Knopf from the chemistry department. Another concern I have with this, how would a faculty member, for example, know, let's say if they're in their 2nd year, what will happen the next 5 years down the line? How can you make them decide to opt in or to opt out at this point in time? I think the original version of the provost, that they opt in or opt out when they submit their TP binder, should be the one that should be actually in this document, rather than constraining it to this fall.
On the other hand, anyone who starts doesn't know what's going to happen in 5 years, and yet they still have 5 years.
Yeah, but does that, for example, mean, let's say I opt in for 1 year? Does that mean I have to wait until year 7 to submit my tenure and promotion? Or can I still do it in year 6 at my regular time?
If you opt in, according to based on this resolution, you opt in. You have to go in the 7th year.
Well, this is absolutely no benefit to the faculty then. Where is the benefit to the untenured faculty, which are burdened by this crisis anyways? If you opt in, then you automatically extend your probationary period automatically. I think the original version of the provost was a good approach. Why are we sticking to these very fundamental rules at this point in time? Why are we not having some flexibility for the faculty, considering that everybody else has flexibility everywhere?
Because we never had it. Now we can carve an exception to it.
Yeah, maybe it's a time to be flexible.
No, exactly. That's the wisdom of this committee, this body.
Yes, but your proposal is more stringent than what the provost actually originally had written.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Udo and Jackie, and the requirement to opt in or opt out, frankly, to opt out of the extension at the end of this semester before the pandemic is even over, just seems totally unrealistic and truly inflexible. And just because since the 1940s we have been unreasonably inflexible doesn't mean that in a time of a pandemic we should maintain that rigid inflexibility that for a number of reasons should probably be loosened. The provost's original explanation or proposal that you can opt out of the extension by submitting a binder seems quite reasonable.
I agree with that too. It just seems to me like the whole purpose of the proposal is to be flexible, and yet we have an inflexible ideological commitment to something that was decided upon 40 years ago. I think that if we're going to be flexible, we should be flexible.
Teresa, is there actually a motion on the?
I don't think anyone actually said, they moved to do this. It doesn't need a second or anything because it came from committee though.
There's a motion from the committee. So
okay.
Wouldn't there need to be a motion to remove those last two lines though?
If someone wants to make an amendment, they can make that motion.
Okay, I make a motion that they remove the part, and I'm not exactly sure what the part is because my screen's kind of messed up, but I make the motion that they remove the part that removes the candidate's ability to decide later about whether or not to take the probationary period. Remove all language in regards to that.
I need to bust in here as parliamentarian. The amendment needs to be more specific. So I'm sorry that your screen is screwed up.
Okay, would somebody then do that, make an motion and give the specific language in terms of what needs to be eliminated, but somebody needs to make a motion to remove the language that takes away the flexibility of the candidate to decide when to when to go up for tenure. Or else it's wed to this motion.
This is Rujna from the chemistry department. Make a motion to strike the last two lines in the committee's suggestion.
The last two lines or the last two sentences?
Oh, the last two sentences. Sorry.
I second that.
Any discussion?
This is Eden with ETL. My concern is, how do I vote on progress towards tenure if I don't know when they're going up for tenure?
You will know when they go for tenure when they go up.
I think, but every year we vote, and at least in my department, on progress towards tenure, and I don't know how I'm going to vote if I don't know if they're going to be able to make tenure because I don't know what year they're going up.
Ask them when they think they're going up. That's what my committee did to me this year.
And I guess I would say assume it's going to be 8 years.
This is Rachel Wolmer from FCS. I have the same concern as Eden, where someone who's maybe been here a few years, like they're not starting right now, so they have a lot of time. And they've got a year or maybe 2 or 3 years. And that's a big difference in meeting the criteria. And so if we've got all these past CMP votes that say, yes, they're making progress, and all of a sudden they decide they're not going to take the extension and go up, but they don't meet the criteria. I worry about just the unclear nature of that. So I wonder if TMP committees at the department level need to make that distinction about if the faculty goes up on schedule versus if they take the extension.
This is Christy McQuaid from Chemistry and Biochemistry. I would just like to remind everyone that the current policy we have for extending the probationary period by 1 year, again, that happens in circumstances in which you need to care for a child that, you've adopted or given birth to, or your spouse has, or to care for a diseased, ill, or injured person. I'm reading this off of the handbook, or your own, dealing with your own disease, illness, or injury. So that's the current policy. That does not require a request to be made until the final April 1st, prior to the final year of the probationary period. So even if you have the child or have the health problem in your first year, you don't have to make that request after the first year. You get to wait until the final year before application to make it. So I don't see this proposal as being different from what we already have in place for these other situations.
I just add to it, making a request and having it are not the same thing. To make a request, it may not be approved. Here, we are giving them the approval prior, 5 years ahead of time, 6 years ahead of time.
This is Kelly McConaughey from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I think in some of the earlier remarks, when people were asking questions of Provost Sakahi about what constitutes the body of work. Is the body of work required to meet the bar of tenure and promotion going to change or not? So if we leave it at 6 years, is it X? And if we let people have 8 years, does it become Y? And the answer was no. It's the same body of work. So really, I think the question here is we need to kind of think through when we're talking about somebody's progress towards tenure and promotion. I think you never give a simple yes or no. If you want to be very helpful and directive to the faculty member, you might say something like, at this point, yes, we think you're making progress, but these are the remaining things you need to do to achieve that body of work that we expect by the time you go up for tenure and promotion. And so if you're giving that kind of feedback on the corpus of accomplishment that is commensurate with getting tenure and promotion in that unit, that's what you really need to be focusing on. In this case, we think that the default is 6 years, but given COVID, it could be 7 or 8, depending on when you came in. Again, I would put the same qualification on that Ahmad did just a few minutes ago, which is unless something else happens and then we have to redesign that part of it as well. But we're really talking about a corpus of accomplishment. We're not talking about how much did you get done this year or that year. We're talking about the entire body. And if you meet that entire body in 8 years, and that's what you were automatically opted into being your maximum, that's great. If you did it in 7, I agree with Udo, you should be able to just submit your package in 7 and not be held accountable for the fact that, well, I met my bar in 7 years, but I can't go up until next year because COVID. So I agree that not having to declare now or soon, I guess I should say, makes good sense, because I also agree with some of the comments that Megan and others made earlier about you don't know exactly what the trickle down effects are going to be today in 3 years. Were the publications able to come out on time because of factors completely out of your control, because of workflow that's on other people outside of your institution? So I think thinking about it as a corpus of work and not as how much work you got done this particular year kind of makes that decision, that feedback to the faculty member less sensitive to if they're going to do it in 6 years or 7 or 8.
If I might add to this one, also the faculty member should always be in conversation with their chair and with their departmental TP committee. If they talk to each other, then they could easily say like, well, you don't have enough body of work. I don't recommend that you go up next year. or something like this. So if they talk to each other all the time, there would never be the question about I'm giving some kind of a reference or some kind of a recommendation. Are you making progress towards tenure? That should not be the issue. The issue is like, is the TP committee and the chair and the department supportive of this or not?
I think what we've got here is maybe a framing due to a wording. We're wording this as an extension, but as I said in my earlier comments to Dr. Standiford, we are not operating as a research university right now. And so to have people go up for tenure when 1 or 2 years we were not operating as a research institution, it should automatically be given to them to go forth quicker. But as was mentioned earlier, what if somebody wants to go up at their regular time? What if somebody has gone ahead and was able to pull the research together early? It should not be their fault that they would be denied the ability to do so. Now, whether or not they'll be able to predict that or not, who knows? We can't predict anything in this environment. And so I think automatically assuming it's going to take 8 years is reasonable, given that for 2 years we weren't operating as a research university. And then if somebody was able to operate as a researcher during that time, I think punishing them by saying you need to go ahead and wait 2 years is not really a fair thing to do.
I have no problem with people going early. I just want to make sure there's a lot of communication with the department about their plan. So as it is right now, you can't go in early before the normal probationary period is up as it is, right? In a normal situation, you can't go up early, even if you have an amazing research record, et cetera. So I think we have to have some kind of deadline. If we're not happy with fall 2020, we need to have some deadline where people say, you know, this is when I make a decision so that my tenure committee knows how to best help me out in that situation.
Actually, our handbook does allow people to go up early under rare and unusual circumstances. We do have that provision, and they don't really need anybody. They don't need to request it. They simply submit their binder to their department early. Usually they're signaled by the department that that is acceptable, but there is a handbook provision for going up early. I believe it's 1 year.
And so that's not widely known.
I'm sorry, not for tenure, just for early promotion.
Oh.
And this is John Bolio from Computer Science. And I'd like to say something on behalf of the tenure track faculty in our department. I would say they strongly against that to set up a deadline for them to opt out. I would just suggest keep the language except just strike out prior to the start of fall 2021. Just inform the department chair. They can inform the department chair anytime they want to. Why should we say prior to some deadline?
Do we have enough? Oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
I was just going to say, just for clarification, procedural clarification here, we're still having discussion on the motion to strike the last 2 sentences.
Yes, we have not voted on the amendment yet.
So so that's the amendment under discussion. So then the last suggestion in terms of leaving in the prior to start of fall 2021, that have to be considered separately, right? Okay, just wanted to clarify what we were discussing. So we are discussing the amendment that would involve striking the last 2 sentences, starting with faculty members, starting prior to fall. You want, Shelley, go ahead and just read it for clarification purposes. Okay, faculty members starting prior to fall 2020 may opt out of the extension or request a 1-year extension before the end of fall 2020. Tenure track faculty members starting academic year 2020-21 may opt out. Now I can't see. Oops.
Of the extending the probationary period by informing their department chair prior to the start of fall 2021.
So that's what we're voting or we will vote on when discussion is over. We're voting on striking the amendment.
Those two
Strike
sentences.
those two sentences. Thank you.
Can we call this question? Really, it's getting late.
All right. Voting on striking the amendment, striking the last two sentences of the motion. Those in favor of striking?
Aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay.
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 Nay. I believe the ayes have it. All right, so the motion that is on the table now then is tenure track faculty members starting prior to fall 2020 are automatically opted into up to a 2-year extension
I'm
of
gonna
their
have to
probation.
vote on this, so.
Up to, let's see, are automatically opted into a 1-year extension of their probationary period. These result in a probationary period of up to 8 years for faculty starting prior to fall 2020 and 7 years for faculty members starting in 2020 to 2021. So this is the motion. Yes.
Teresa, would it be helpful? I'm able to display that with the language removed.
That would be great.
Helpful?
I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
This is Ethan Ham from Interactive Media. I like the flexibility. I think it's important to keep language about being able to opt out of this. So what I fear is we've now obligated our faculty to take at least a 1-year extension.
This is Dan Matissa from Theater Arts. That was what I was just about to say. I think we may have to craft a new addendum here to the tune of faculty members may opt out.
Are you making a motion to do that?
No, I'm saying let's discuss. I guess we need to discuss how to word it.
This is Christy McQuaid. I propose to add a sentence, and Danielle, do you have the sentence or should I read it out loud to you?
I can find the previous sentence. Is it the one that we had discussed earlier?
About earlier. I think
Okay.
it's a perfectly fine sentence.
Okay, I will share that.
Yes, that sentence.
Sorry, I hope you didn't see the swear words as I scrolled past my notes. Or maybe I hope you did. All right. I will mute myself again.
So Christy, you are making the motion to add this?
Yes, I move that we add the sentence that Danielle just pasted in.
Is there a second?
I second it.
For those who might not have the video, could you please read that?
The sentence to be proposed to be added is faculty members may opt out of the extension, parentheses, 1 or both years of the probationary period by applying for tenure at the beginning of their 6th or 7th year of service for those hired into tenure track lines prior to fall 2020, or the 6th year for those beginning employment in fall 2020.
I second this motion.
Any discussion?
And Matissa, Theater Arts again. Do we want to consider changing of 6th or 7th year of service to 6th or 7th year of consideration, simply because some of us may have a year prior credit in which we are not, which is put into consideration, but it's not service at Bradley necessarily.
Mike, does that require a new motion to just change that word?
Yes.
I hereby
that's an amendment.
Amendment to the amendment. I hereby move that of service be changed to of consideration.
I second that.
Okay.
Point of clarification is the word, is that going to be understood by people who aren't at this meeting?
I don't know.
It says the final year of the probationary period. But I'm not sure, if that's the right way to go.
So do we have to vote on this amendment, or can he withdraw it and we change the term?
It shouldn't be withdrawn because there was some discussion, but we have characteristically said if we thought there was a bad word choice, then we could just omit it and go back to the previous amended position. That would be up to Dan.
So I can do that? Or, and
That's actually up to Dan because he
Okay.
made the suggestion.
I hereby withdraw the motion
okay.
to change of service to of consideration.
Oh, you did? Are you muted?
And Croatia Matt Tim appears that he is back.
By the way, I would just remind people as parliamentarian, we are about to start making sausage in public.
Is there a way to move to, I don't want this to go on forever in terms of back in the committee either, because I think we're really close. But is there something in between continuing to make sausage and sending it back to committee?
Can I make a motion that we continue this next meeting?
The official language for such a proposal is to postpone to a definite time. And
Could
then,
I
and
move
then,
that we
and then state the definite time, please.
Okay.
Can we do that if we already have motions on the floor?
Yes, that takes
Okay.
precedent.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I would just move what Michael said, and the time period would be the next meeting of the Faculty Senate.
Second.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor, discussion about postponing.
Can I ask this? I think the handbook says if two people make if there's a motion and a second on that, doesn't it automatically move to the, isn't that automatically moved, Mike?
I think that's a little bit different than what we're talking about here.
Okay, never mind.
So are we gonna go ahead and put this off to another meeting because there's one word we don't agree on?
Thank you.
That is the motion that is currently on the floor.
Sorry.
Shall we call a vote for that to postpone?
Just in response to that,
Discussion.
I'm not sure it's just the issue of one word. I think it's an issue of, if we're having this much trouble determining whether things are clear, we probably do want to, this is an important thing. And to a lot of people who, given our situation, so that we do need to devote significant consideration to it. So I don't think it's just a matter of wordsmithing necessarily. I think we just really need to make this clear.
The only thing I've heard that's been of concern of the wording is the word service. That's the only concern that's been expressed.
It wouldn't be, though, the 6th or 7th year if a person came in with a year of credit, right? Then it would be the 5th or 6th year. So we may need to make a little bit bigger tweaks than that. Am I right? Am I understanding that correctly?
If they came in with years towards credit, wouldn't that still be their 6th or 7th year? But part of that time is the credit they bring in.
I believe that's the case. That's how I would interpret that.
What if we were to insert the word, and I'm testing it first, and then I'll make a motion, although I know we have to finish the one about referring before we can go back and make a motion about this. But I think that it might be solved by saying for applying for tenure at any time up to the beginning of. I'm taking it away just to show you the power of the word, but that might take care of the gap that Dan has identified, right? Because it's not going to bar people who came with years of experience and time toward tenure. It's not going to bar them from being able to end their tenure. and their probationary period. I'm not sure if that's what we're hung up on, because it was consideration versus years of service, right? Was the previous suggestion from Dan.
But the concern there was not the years that people brought in towards credit. The concern there was the people who had service at Bradley, and it was not part before they got onto the tenure track. The concern about people who have brought in service is already addressed inherently in the fact that whenever you bring in credit towards, then it still becomes your 7th or 8th year. Just all of that credit towards that 7th or 8th year wasn't earned at Bradley. The concern in terms of the word service was that people may have provided service to Bradley before they got onto the tenure clock.
All right, I think the motion on the floor is whether we want to postpone this or not. So the motion was to postpone to the next meeting.
Right.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
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 I'd say the ayes have that. So we'll postpone this until the November meeting. All right, I believe Matt Tim is back. Are you there, Matt?
I am, but you're doing a wonderful job.
Oh, I'm done. Thank you. I'll hand that gavel back to you. Thank you.
I don't know where we are, so
We have
Somebody-
just postponed the stop the clock motion till next meeting.
until the next meeting. And what time of the day is it? 5:15, it appears on my clock on the wall. I think we should entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
All those in favor, vote with your mouse.
Aye.
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 Thanks, everybody.